If someone told me a year ago that the worst day of my life would become the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have laughed in their face. But here I am, sitting in my own cozy little apartment in Austin, sipping coffee I actually enjoy, typing this out for strangers on Reddit. Last September, I walked into my house a little earlier than usual because my boss let me off work after a big client presentation. I thought it would be a good idea to surprise my husband, Brian. We had been married for 7 years, and although things weren't perfect, I thought we were solid. I thought wrong. When I opened our bedroom door, I found Brian in bed with our neighbor, Jenny. Not kissing, not cuddling, not oops, I tripped and fell full-on betrayal. I froze, my body refusing to catch up with what my brain was screaming. Jenny screamed, Brian jumped up, and I laughed. I don't know why, but I laughed so hard that I started crying. Brian scrambled for excuses. Jenny tried to cover herself with the sheets, but I just turned around and walked out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of them. I just left. That night, I sat in my car outside a 24-hour diner, staring at the neon lights, feeling like someone had hit the reset button on my life. I could either stay in this dumpster fire of a marriage or burn it all down and see what rose from the ashes. Spoiler alert, I chose fire. The next morning, I didn't go home. I drove to my sister's house on the other side of town. She opened the door, saw my puffy eyes, and simply said, "What did he do?" No explanation needed. I told her everything word for word, including the part where I laughed like a maniac before leaving. She hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would break. I stayed with her for a week while I figured out my next steps. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't just destroy your trust in that person, it cracks your whole sense of who you are. Was I stupid for not noticing? Was I boring? Unlovable? I kept running those questions in my head like a broken record. Then one morning, while sipping burnt coffee in her kitchen, I saw a for lease sign on an old brick building downtown. Something inside me sparked. I used to love baking, it was my therapy during college, and I'd once dreamed about opening my own bakery. Life, marriage, bills, they had all put that dream to sleep. But at that moment, I thought, why not? My marriage was over, my life felt like it had exploded, so why not rebuild it my way? That day, I called a lawyer. Divorce papers were filed by Friday. Brian tried calling dozens of times, but I blocked his number. Jenny even sent me an email saying, "It just happened, we didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed out loud again, but this time it felt different. It felt like freedom. I dipped into my savings, money Brian always said we should keep for emergencies. Well, guess what, Brian? This is an emergency, and signed a lease for that little brick storefront. I didn't even know how I'd manage the bills yet, but I hadn't felt that alive in years. 2 weeks after filing for divorce, I finally went back to the house to grab my things. I timed it for when I knew Brian would be at work, but of course, life has a sick sense of humor. He was there. Sitting on the porch like some sad country song, holding a cup of coffee in my favorite mug. He stood up the second he saw me. "Jess, please, can we talk?" I wanted to ignore him, but he looked pathetic. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean he looked like a man who finally realized he lost something he couldn't replace. He started rambling about how it didn't mean anything and how we can fix this. I let him finish his speech, then I said something I never thought I'd say out loud. "Brian, I don't love you anymore." It wasn't a dramatic scream or a bitter jab, it was calm, like stating the weather. And the second I said it, I realized it was true. I hadn't loved him in years. I loved the idea of us, the routine, the safety net. But him? That was gone long before Jenny. Brian's face crumbled. He asked if there was someone else, as if I had time for that, if I'd at least consider counseling. I said no, and for the first time, I felt powerful. When I walked out of that house for the last time, I didn't look back. He called after me, saying he'd change, that he was already a different man. But I'd heard that before. And if Jenny didn't make him change, nothing would. On the way to my sister's, I turned up the radio and screamed the lyrics to some stupid pop song like a teenager. It was the first time in years I felt light, like someone had cut a weight off my chest. But just because I closed the door on Brian didn't mean life would suddenly be easy. In fact, it was about to get much harder and so much better. The first week after leaving Brian felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. I had no plan beyond "don't go back." But something in me refused to let fear win this time. I took every penny of the emergency savings, cashed out a small retirement account I had from a job 5 years ago, and signed the lease on that little brick storefront downtown. The building was rough. The floor had cracks, one of the windows was boarded up, and the walls were still painted a horrific shade of beige from a failed insurance office that had been there before. But when I stepped inside, I didn't see beige and broken glass. I saw warm wooden tables, glass cases full of pastries, and people laughing over coffee. I saw my dream. I spent nights on YouTube learning about small business licenses, tax codes, marketing strategies, stuff I had ignored when I once half-heartedly thought about starting a bakery years ago. I worked my day job, which I absolutely hated, and spent every free moment scraping paint, sanding floors, and emailing suppliers. It was exhausting, but every blister, every late-night panic attack about money, felt like an investment in me. Somewhere in that whirlwind, I realized I was also changing physically. I had always been a little self-conscious about my weight, my style, the fact that I never really dressed up. But working on the bakery made me feel powerful. I cut my hair short, a sharp bob that Brian always said I'd regret. I didn't. I started jogging in the mornings, not because I wanted to lose weight, but because I needed to move, to burn off this new restless energy. Within a month, I felt lighter, not just physically, but emotionally, like I had shed an old version of myself I didn't even realize I was still carrying. One night, after 12 hours of sanding and painting, I stood in the middle of that half-finished bakery, covered in sweat and plaster dust, and cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in years, I was proud of myself. For months after signing that lease, my bakery, Rising Phoenix, yeah, dramatic, I know, but it felt right, was finally ready to open. I spent the night before pacing my tiny apartment, terrified no one would show up. My sister promised me she'd bring her friends, but I still pictured myself standing behind the counter with trays of untouched pastries and an awkward smile. When morning came, I woke up at 4 a.m., baked like my life depended on it, and nearly burned through an entire tray of croissants because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. By 7:30 a.m., I flipped the sign to open. And then, nothing. For 10 agonizing minutes, I just stood there, wiping the same spot on the counter over and over, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Then the door chimed. An older man in a flannel shirt walked in, said he'd been curious about the new bakery on the block, and ordered a cinnamon roll. I swear I almost cried handing it to him. He took one bite, closed his eyes, and said, "Damn, that's good." My heart exploded. After that, it was like the floodgates opened. People from nearby offices came in for coffee. A young mom with 2 toddlers bought half a dozen muffins. My sister and her entire book club showed up wearing t-shirts that said Team Jess, embarrassing, but also adorable. By noon, I had sold out of everything I baked. At one point, I slipped into the back room, sat on an overturned flour bucket, and just breathed. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear, this time from excitement. I had actually done it. I built something out of the ashes of a broken life, and people loved it. That night, I collapsed onto my couch, covered in flour and sugar, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And I knew this was only the beginning. It started on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after opening. I was pulling a fresh batch of scones from the oven when the door chimed, and in walked a man I'd never seen before. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair just messy enough to look intentional. He wore jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, but somehow looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine about rugged outdoor living. "Hey," he said, his voice low and warm. "Do you serve anything that won't make my trainer kill me?" I laughed, an actual, genuine laugh, not the awkward customer service kind. "Depends. How strict is your trainer?" "Strict enough," he said, grinning as he scanned the display case. "But life's too short, right?" He ordered a black coffee and a blueberry scone and sat at one of the corner tables with a laptop. For the next hour, he worked quietly, occasionally glancing up to give me a small smile when I caught him watching me wipe down the counter or box pastries. Normally, I hated when men stared. It felt invasive, but there was something different about him. He didn't look at me like I was prey. He looked at me like I was interesting. After he left, I found a business card on the table. Ethan Walker, architect. On the back, in neat handwriting, was a note. Best scone I've had in years. He came back 2 days later. And then again the next week. Always ordering something small, always working from that same corner table, always giving me that calm, easy smile. My sister noticed and immediately whispered, "Hello, bakery boyfriend," every time he walked in. I rolled my eyes, but secretly, I liked the attention. For the first time since Brian, I felt visible. Not as someone's wife or someone's mistake, but as me, someone worth noticing. And that realization was both terrifying and thrilling. It took only 3 weeks for Brian to find out about Ethan. I don't know who told him, maybe someone in the neighborhood who saw us talking outside the bakery one evening, but suddenly my phone lit up with a blocked number and a voicemail I wish I'd never listened to. "Jess, so this is what you're doing now? Jumping into bed with the first guy who smiles at you? I can't believe this. After everything we've been through, after I said I wanted to work things out you." I stopped listening and deleted it. But that knot in my stomach was back. I hadn't even gone on a real date with Ethan yet. All we'd done was talk about architecture and laugh about how I once dropped an entire tray of muffins in front of customers. And yet, Brian's voice still had the power to make me feel small. 2 days later, he showed up at the bakery. I was wiping down tables when I saw him through the front window, leaning against his car like he had every right to be there. My hands clenched around the rag. He walked in, wearing that fake casual smile he always used when he was trying to manipulate me. "Nice place you've got," he said, scanning the shop like it was his. "Must be nice having help from your new friend." "Leave, Brian," I said, loud enough that 2 customers turned to look. He didn't move. "You don't even know this guy. What if he's using you? What if he's worse than me?" "Impossible," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "Now leave." Ethan, who'd been sitting in his usual corner, stood up and walked over. He didn't say a word, just placed himself between me and Brian. The look on Ethan's face was calm but deadly serious, like he'd handle whatever happened next without hesitation. Brian muttered something under his breath and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood there shaking, not from fear, but from anger. Anger that he still thought he had any control over me. That night, Ethan texted, "You okay? Wanna talk?" FO. 2 weeks after the Brian incident, life seemed to settle into a rhythm again. Ethan still came by, but now we talked more, longer conversations about life, not just pastries. Still, I was cautious. My heart had been broken once, and while I liked Ethan, I wasn't ready to jump off any emotional cliffs. Then came the review. One morning, a woman I didn't recognize came in, ordered half the menu, and quietly sat in the corner tasting everything like she was judging a baking competition. She didn't say much beyond "thank you" when she left, but 2 days later, my sister burst into the bakery holding her phone. "Jess, you're trending," she shouted. Apparently, the woman was a popular food blogger with over 500,000 followers. She had posted a glowing review titled, "The Hidden Gem Bakery That Made Me Cry Into My Latte." She raved about the cinnamon rolls, the cozy vibe, and even included a picture of me behind the counter looking like a deer in headlights. Within hours, my phone was blowing up. Online orders flooded in, and a local morning news show called, asking if I'd do a segment about small businesses thriving after personal hardship. I had no idea how they knew about Brian, but apparently gossip travels fast. The following Saturday, I was on live TV, my hands shaking as I piped frosting onto cupcakes, while telling the host how I turned heartbreak into opportunity. Ethan watched from the sidelines, giving me that calm, grounding smile. The next week, business tripled. I had to hire 2 part-time employees and extend hours just to keep up. For the first time, my savings account wasn't bleeding, it was growing. And for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about the future. That night, Ethan took me out for dinner. Not coffee, not pastries, but an actual dinner. It wasn't a big romantic gesture, just easy conversation and shared laughter. But as I sat there, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of failing, not of loving again. The bakery was thriving in a way I never could have imagined. Orders were backed up for days, and people were driving from neighboring towns just to try the place that went viral. I should have been celebrating every second of it. Instead, I was dealing with him again. It started with a 1-star review on Google. Owner is rude, pastries are stale, wouldn't recommend. The account had no profile picture and no other reviews. Normally, I would have ignored it, but then 3 more appeared in the same week, all echoing the same weirdly specific complaints. Burnt muffins, bad attitude, probably doesn't bake her own stuff. It didn't take long to find out why. One of my new part-timers, a college kid named Maria, overheard Brian at the local bar bragging about how he was teaching his ex-wife a lesson. I saw red. For years, I had let Brian's opinion define me, whether I was good enough as a wife, as a woman, as a human being. But this time, he wasn't just trying to hurt me. He was going after something I'd built with my own 2 hands. Ethan was the one who calmed me down before I marched to Brian's house with a rolling pin. "Let it go," he said softly, sitting across from me in the closed bakery late one night. "He's angry because you're winning. That's all this is." But I couldn't let it go. Not entirely. I contacted Google, flagged the fake reviews, and posted a simple statement on my bakery's page. "We stand by our quality and are proud to serve our community. Thank you for supporting small businesses built on love and resilience." The next morning, something unexpected happened. Customers rallied. People left dozens of positive reviews, posted photos of their favorite pastries, and shared my story again. By the end of the week, the 1-star nonsense was buried under 5-star love. Brian tried to break me again. Instead, he made me stronger and, weirdly, brought me closer to Ethan. Because that night, when I locked up and sat with him on the curb eating leftover cookies, I realized I trusted him. Really trusted him. Ethan showed up at the bakery one Thursday evening, just as I was flipping the sign to closed. He wasn't carrying his laptop this time. Instead, he held 2 takeout bags and a bottle of wine. "I figured you probably skipped dinner again," he said with that quiet, warm smile of his. I hesitated. My first instinct was to keep things safe and professional, just coffee, casual chats, nothing risky. But something in his eyes felt different that night, steady and patient. Like he wasn't just asking me out to dinner, he was asking me to trust him. We sat at one of my own bakery tables, the smell of sugar and cinnamon still lingering in the air, eating cold Thai food and drinking wine out of coffee mugs, because I still hadn't bought actual glasses. For the first time in months, I felt comfortable. Not performing, not guarding my words, just being. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You know, you're kind of incredible." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "You don't even know me that well." "I know enough," he said softly. "You built this from nothing. You're strong, Jess. And you don't even see it." That hit me harder than I expected. Because for so long, I hadn't felt strong, I'd felt broken. I stared at him, and for a terrifying second, I almost cried. But instead, I did something scarier. I told him the truth. "I'm scared," I admitted. I don't know how to do this. I gave everything to someone once, and he crushed it. And I don't know if I can ever." "You don't have to give me everything," Ethan interrupted gently. "Just give me a chance." And there it was, my moment of choice. The old me would have run, built a wall so high even sunlight couldn't get through. But the me who rebuilt her life from scratch, who faced down public embarrassment and fake reviews and her own demons, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't fireworks or movie magic. It was real, warm, and steady. And for the first time since Brian, I felt like my heart wasn't just AL. Months passed, and with each day, the bakery grew stronger, and so did we. Ethan wasn't just a visitor in my life. He became my partner in every sense. We brainstormed new recipes, planned marketing ideas, and shared quiet mornings sipping coffee before the rush. One crisp autumn morning, a call changed everything. A popular regional cafe chain wanted to feature my pastries in all their locations. It was the kind of opportunity that could skyrocket the business to a whole new level, but also a challenge that scared me. I sat on my porch, the sun warming my face, thinking about how far I'd come from that broken woman Brian left behind. This wasn't just a business deal. It was proof I had rebuilt my life stronger than ever, brick by brick. Ethan held my hand and smiled. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. And for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that the past no longer defined me. The woman who once cried over a shattered marriage was now someone who chased dreams and caught them. The deal with the cafe chain wasn't easy. It meant long hours, adjusting recipes, and learning to trust others to help manage the growing demand. But every challenge was a reminder of how far I'd come, not just from Brian's betrayal, but from the doubts I once carried about myself. The day the first shipment left our bakery for distribution felt surreal. Standing by the loading dock, watching boxes stamped with Rising Phoenix being loaded into the truck, I realized this was more than a business, it was a symbol of my rebirth. Ethan squeezed my hand, his eyes full of pride. "You did this," he said softly. I smiled, the warmth spreading through me. We did this. That night, we celebrated quietly in the empty bakery. No grand gestures, just the two of us and a bottle of champagne stolen from a neighbor's party. As we toasted, I thought about the woman I'd been, the scared, betrayed wife, and the woman I had become. Strong, hopeful, loved. Brian was a chapter, not my story. And this new life? It was mine to write.